Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Hi, my name is Derek Van Dyke, and I'm the producer / editor / co-host at Superlux Gamescast, also known as just SDGC. For today's Fun and Games Side Quest, I want to talk to you about a video game that is very special to me, The Evil Within 2. I have a soft spot for horror, and while I might not call The Evil Within 2 one of the scariest games of all time, I would probably still call it one of the best horror games I've ever played. That sounds like a weird contradiction, and I promise that we'll get to why. But first, we need to start with both the original Evil Within and with the game that it so desperately wanted to be, Resident Evil 4. The Evil Within is almost defined by its similarity to creator Shinji Mikami's most famous work, and it's probably the closest anyone has ever come to replicating it. While The Evil Within is nowhere near as focused or cohesive as Resident Evil 4, at its best it is every bit as tense and memorable. It has great enemy encounter design, extremely memorable boss fights, and creates that same frantic feeling of always being just one mistake away from death when the action really kicks in. Also, like Resident Evil 4, the plot of the original game is something of an afterthought. Protagonist Detective Sebastian Castellanos is a Brand X Leon Kennedy, clearly inspired by the latter's unflappable coolness in Resident Evil 4. He has no character arc to speak of, and any details about him are relegated to these optional journal entries about him joining the police force, getting married to another detective named Myra, them losing their daughter Lily in a house fire, and his wife losing her grip on reality as she chases conspiracies to try to explain the senseless tragedy that they lived through. But none of that really plays into the story. Again, that's all just in optional side journal entries that you probably won't even read. Detective Badass Cool Guy responds to a call at a mental hospital, gets sucked into a strange dream world, fights a bunch of scary as hell monsters. There's an evil sociopathic albino trying to escape through another innocent albino kid's brain. Don't know why they need to be albino, not overthinking it. And in the end, you were all hooked up to a machine called the STEM that makes a sort of psychic cognitive world out of the shared mental projections of the people hooked up to it. Whack. It doesn't all fit together super well, but it fits together well enough to justify throwing Detective Badass Cool Guy against a bunch of wildly disparate horror scenarios and then connect them all together. We have talked a lot about the original game so far, and that's because The Evil Within 2 both builds off of and defies the original in very important ways. I like to say that if The Evil Within is trying to be Resident Evil 4, The Evil Within 2 realizes it needs to turn itself into Silent Hill 2 instead. And you can play The Evil Within 2 without playing the original, but you probably do owe it to yourself to do a quick playthrough of 1 first. The Evil Within 2 opens with Sebastian reliving the night of the fire that killed his child. Unable to continue repressing the pain of losing his family, and deeply traumatized by the violence and near-death experiences of the first game, and visibly wasting away, Sebastian has given up entirely at functioning as a human being. The contrast here, going from the first game to the second, I think really helps sell just how broken Sebastian is at the start of The Evil Within 2. Then, Sebastian is approached in a bar by Julie Kidman, an associate returning from the first game. Turns out, not only is his daughter Lily still alive, but his wife Myra was actually right all along. The fire was a front, and Lily was actually kidnapped. Now the core of a new STEM machine, Lily is the key to its virtual world, and the target of multiple dangerous foes who have managed to infiltrate it. Sebastian will have to wade back into the horrors of the STEM to find and pull her out before anyone else gets to her. The Evil Within 2 ditches the linear set-piece levels of the first game for more of a tight and dense, semi-open world. It's difficult to describe just how much the game changes from this alone, and few horror games pull off an open-world concept so well. Many of the basic controls and mechanics of the first game are largely unchanged, but now you need to actually navigate and survive this monster-infested town, scrounge for supplies, and choose how geographically to best approach any given objective. However, it's the writing and the story that really elevate The Evil Within 2 for me. Most horror game protagonists are like Sebastian in the first game. They're blank slates who mostly exist as an avatar for the player character to interact with the world through. The sequel recontextualizes the original as the source of trauma that it would be, and gives Sebastian far more characters to actually interact with and bounce off of. And while sad dads have kind of become a meme in prestige games writing these days, I think the game does a remarkable job both at portraying Sebastian's struggle with trauma and showing his journey in finding closure and learning how to heal, with or without his family intact. I think it helps that Sebastian is not portrayed as the kind of traditional toxic masculine protagonist that a lot of sad dad types are. From everything we've seen, he seems to have actually been a very good dad and husband. Sebastian is not a toxic man trying to overcome his own failings. He's a good man who went through a lot of heavy shit and is trying to find his way to healing. And I think that's just a more interesting character arc to go through. There are also just a ton of small details in how the game unfolds that are incredibly satisfying and show just how much thought was put into this game. The world evolves and changes at major story beats in some pretty dramatic ways without cutting off access to previous side quests, which I find very satisfying. Each of the major villain characters has a unique sort of affect and aesthetic that their subconscious projects into the stem, which makes for a really cool moment when you run into something in the story that is so clearly not part of everything else going on, that you realize there kind of has to be more going on than the game is telling you. And then there's this fantastic chain of side quests that, once the first one is initiated, brings in an entirely optional super predator that can pop up anywhere in the open world. And whoo boy, does it know how to make you drop everything else you're doing when it shows up. I've now beaten The Evil Within 2 3 separate times, and it still refuses to leave my brain. It has taken up permanent residence in some small corner, a home to some of the most memorable moments in horror gaming, a stunningly improved sequel, and an example of how much better horror games can be when you write an earnest character story into your horror protagonist. The Evil Within series does not want to be Resident Evil 4 anymore. It wants to be something more. And if there's ever an Evil Within 3, which unresolved plot threads from the first game and a stinger in the second game suggest, it should probably be supporting character Kidman's time to shine. For all the good and the bad, Sebastian earned his ending here. Thank you for coming with me on this side quest. Happy gaming!
Hi, I'm Matt, aka Stormageddon, and I'm the host of CPOV Autographs at certainpov.com. It is a bi-weekly interview series where I interview folks from all over the arts, from writers to comedians to magicians to musicians, even actors, historians, podcasters, pretty much anyone who's willing to chat with me for a little bit. If you like interesting conversations with even more interesting people, go to certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts, and remember, music is life, and life is good.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.